Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Of course, we're half an hour into program time. That is because we chose to start our program at 1 o'clock today, so to give you 30 minutes of programming. Of course, it's another great week. Let me first explain to you why we're only having 30 minutes of Facing the Nation today. Well, there was a sitting of the National Assembly last evening, and there's another one happening today. Last evening would have been the 65th sitting of the National Assembly, and today is the 66th sitting of the National Assembly. That means most of those persons who are scheduled, who I would have scheduled to be on today's program, obviously because they had to be in the National Assembly, they could not come on our program today. But have no fear, we have in a sense pushed them forward or backward, whichever one you want to describe it as, to another week. Last week I did tell you that the minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, she would be here on the program on the last Friday of June. The idea was to have the minister responsible for housing, that is the minister within the Ministry of Communities, the Honorable Valerie Patterson. The idea was to have her on today's program along with Minister of Citizenship, Mr. Winston Felix. But again, they had a very late night last night, and they are also preparing to head to the National Assembly in another hour or so. So they need to focus all their energies there. So next week, we're going to be talking to Minister Patterson, that is the female Patterson, Minister Valerie Patterson, who will basically give you somewhat of, for want of a better term, wash down, a wrap up more or less of the housing exhibition that was held 2 or 3 weeks ago. She'll tell you everything that came out of that in terms of how we benefited, and being that it's first of its kind with the replica of the various houses and so on. So she'll be here to tell you all about that and to give you future plans for the Department of Housing. We continue to remind you, and yes, the government is well aware, the housing sector in Guyana is a very, very important one. Providing housing, providing shelter for our people is very important. It's one of the things that helps to reduce our level of poverty. Once people have proper homes to live in, it contributes to the reduction of poverty. So the housing sector is definitely a very important one for the government of Guyana. So we'll definitely have Minister Patterson next week to talk about all those things that the sector would have benefited from that exhibition, and to give you an idea of what is to come, especially as it relates to the project, the Housing Solutions 2017 and beyond. You know, on previous programs, we also had those persons who are, and this is the government side, those persons who have a direct hand in what is happening with housing in Guyana. So she'll definitely be here next week to talk to you about that. Today, however, for the next 25 minutes or so, I'll be focusing a bit on what happened in the National Assembly last evening, as it relates to our what is going to be our oil sector, oil and gas. As you know, that's very huge for Guyana right now. It is also new for us. It is new territory. So there are lots of back and forth going. Some people think they're experts, while not being sure that that they really and truly don't know what it is that they're focusing on. But I must take this opportunity, and he was also on this program a few months ago, the Minister of Natural Resources, the Honorable Raphael Trotman, and he did iron out plans how the government is planning to move forward and take control of the oil and gas sectors. And what happened last evening in the National Assembly, that minister moved the second reading of the bill, which is the Petroleum Commission bill. Of course, it was subsequently sent to a select committee, but he moved the second reading of that bill in the National Assembly last night. Of course, there was a debate and lots of back and forth on it. Just to give you an idea, the Petroleum Commission bill makes provision for the establishment of a Petroleum Commission to serve as a regulatory agency for Guyana's oil and gas industry. It will also provide for the monitoring and regulation of this sector. Of course, that bit there, that's a fact. That is exactly what this is designed to do. So what I'm going to do is ask our operator now to pull up the clip where this is basically this would have been after the debate. This is basically Minister Trotman's wrap-up sentiments, and of course it did get a bit heated, and he had to as we say in Guyana, he had to put a certain opposition official in his place, but I'd like you to take a look at the entire thing to hear not only him putting that opposition official in his place, but I want to give you the substance of exactly what came out of that conversation in the National Assembly last evening. So take a look at Minister Trotman's presentation. It's about 20 minutes or so. This is Facing the Nation.
17, published on the 28th of April 2017, be now read a second time. Mr. Speaker, this bill was drafted before reaching here, of course, by the Commonwealth Secretariat's Oceanic and Natural Resources Advisory Division. It was then sent to us after extensive consultations for further consultations with stakeholders before, of course, having it come to the House. The bill, Mr. Speaker, provides a legal framework for regulating and monitoring the efficient, safe, effective, and environmentally responsible exploration, development, and production of petroleum in Guyana. Its entrance into this House, Mr. Speaker, is timely, is necessary, and of course, Mr. Speaker, is a progressive step. The bill contains 51 clauses and is divided into 6 parts and takes us through the Petroleum Commission itself, the Board of Directors, the functions of the Commissioner, the financial regulations and matters which will regulate the financial aspects of the work of the Commission, and of course, as we find in all bills of this nature, the miscellaneous aspects. The key objectives of the proposed act are, and I, with your leave, will go through them, enumerate them, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, to provide for the establishment and functions of a petroleum regulatory agency. Secondly, to provide for the monitoring and regulation of efficient, safe, effective, and environmentally responsible exploration, development, and production of petroleum in Guyana. And thirdly, to provide for a structured regulatory medium through which the governance tenets of the efficiency, sustainability, and certainty within the petroleum sector can be continuously developed and applied. Mr. Speaker, I pause to inform the House that currently the regime that governs and oversees all aspects of petroleum in Guyana is contained within the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act of 1986, which was later amended in 1997. This act, Mr. Speaker, in fact, makes the minister the sole arbiter and decider of all matters. The grant or refusal of licenses, the penalties to be prescribed, the hiring and firing of staff, and the appointment of all persons. And so, Mr. Speaker, it was felt, as I will develop the argument later, that given our structures and given the steps that we are taking towards production of petroleum in a few years, that some of these powers should be devolved to a commission or an agency, a regulatory agency. And so that the minister will no longer, Mr. Speaker, have all of the powers as contained in this act. So, Mr. Speaker, we are taking a step towards enlightenment. I also wish to mention, Mr. Speaker, that given our system of governance as practiced, where all executive power resides in an executive president, and he or she devolves from time to time some or all of those powers to individual ministers or departments. We, Mr. Speaker, being creatures in a sense of the executive president, we are ourselves, through statute, authorized from time to time to devolve some of our powers to statutory agencies which are known as semi-autonomous agencies. It is for this reason, Mr. Speaker, that the notion that ministers should have no say whatsoever in the work of an agency or board is really alien to the system of governance practice in Guyana. Perhaps in other jurisdictions, we have purely autonomous agencies, but in Guyana, there is not a single state agency that does not come under the oversight of a minister. As the Honourable Member and Attorney General pointed out just a few minutes ago, if you are responsible for an agency or department, you have to exercise some authority over it. with that said, Mr. Speaker, I wish to take some time, not too much time, just going through some of the salient features of this bill and to say why I believe it is necessary. As we know, Mr. Speaker, in May of 2015, ExxonMobil announced to Guyana and to the world that it had made a significant discovery of petroleum offshore the coast of Guyana in what is known as the Guyana Basin. Since then, Mr. Speaker, we have gone on to assess the quantum and the value of that resource, and it has been publicly stated that the resource contains, in the Liza well that is, a minimum of 800 million barrels to a possible 1.4 billion barrels of recoverable crude. We, Mr. Speaker, can also report, as we did in December of last year, that the company, that is ExxonMobil, with its partners Hess and CNOOC Nexen, continued with its exploration and, Mr. Speaker, despite experiencing one mishap in not being able to make a discovery, also made 2 further discoveries, which we are still in the process of quantifying. It is believed, Mr. Speaker, that to date, the estimatable barrels of oil in the Stabroek block, that is the block controlled by Exxon, may equal as much as 2 billion barrels of recoverable oil. Mr. Speaker, I say this because these are matters which we may read about tomorrow, as they are likely to be published. I saw a press release prepared by one of the companies, and that is likely to make the news in a few days' time. So, Mr. Speaker, this tells us that we must prepare. I should add as well that quite apart from Exxon and its partners, other international operators have also signaled their intention to continue exploratory activities in Guyana and hopefully to go on to production if and when discoveries are made, and others have indicated a great interest in being here. And so, since May of 2015, the government of Guyana, through the Ministry of Natural Resources in particular, and working in tandem with a number of other ministries, particularly ministries of finance, ministries of public infrastructure, business, agriculture, to name a few, have been working and preparing assiduously for what is known as first oil. To that end, Mr. Speaker, we have reviewed and redrafted existing laws, including the Petroleum Act, which I referenced a few minutes ago. That I hope to bring an amended version of later in the year. And we have had the support from the Commonwealth Secretariat that I mentioned, its Oceanic and Natural Resources Division. We have as well, Mr. Speaker, drafted an upstream oil and gas policy and a local content policy, which were done by overseas experts. We have retained petroleum consultants. We are assessing the next steps towards production. We have been engaged in numerous and countless engagements and consultations in the country, around the country, as people have been asking questions of us and we have been attempting to respond. Mr. Speaker, before I go further, allow me to say as well that we anticipate that we will start production by or in 2020, and it is for this reason that this bill is necessary. I should add as well that it is known that the government, Mr. Speaker, had received an application from ExxonMobil in December of 2016 for an approval of its development plan, that is for the first phase of the Liza development, and for a production license to be issued. Government had indicated a few weeks ago that it was prepared to issue that license so that the investment decision that was needed could be made expeditiously, and I wish to report that government has taken a decision to issue that license. This follows on the advice of world-renowned experts who reviewed the development plan and advised that it was appropriate to do so. So, Mr. Speaker, it is pellucid that the new and emerging hydrocarbon extractive countries, like ours, must ensure that the proper legal, regulatory, and governance structures are in place to focus on and manage the myriad activities and connected agency relations that are associated with this extractive sector. Kenya, Uganda, and Ghana have clearly demonstrated the understanding of this approach. Other more advanced states such as Australia, Azerbaijan, Canada, and the United States, and our own Caribbean sister state, Trinidad and Tobago, all firmly encourage and endorse this approach from their own hard-earned lessons. In addition to the foregoing, Mr. Speaker, the Government of Guyana is committed to green development and the maintenance of our national patrimony for generational benefits. And these demand sustainable governance and development of our extractive industries sector. So, Mr. Speaker, following on many reviews, including that done by a UNDP expert who conducted what we refer to as a rapid assessment, following a review by the Commonwealth Secretariat's Oceans and Natural Resources Division, following assessments conducted by other international financial agencies and experts, the decision was taken to create a commission that will stand separate and apart from the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, which currently has a responsibility for regulating petroleum matters, and have this commission stand alongside sister organizations and agencies such as the GGMC itself, the Guyana Forestry Commission, the Guyana Protected Areas Commission to some extent, and an environmental protection agency. So in all material ways, Mr. Speaker, this bill mirrors the provisions of those other acts because he wanted to ensure that this new commission was consistent in its provisions with the Guyana Forestry Commission, the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission in the main, and the other agencies, the EPA and the Protected Areas Commission. Mr. Speaker, I will just take us through some of the salient features of the bill with your leave, and will not delay us, but I will reserve my comments for the rebuttal and to say that this bill will be going to committee for further refinement because the government does not stand here and assert that it has all the answers or it knows everything. We have already taken this bill through several iterations. It has been reviewed abroad in many jurisdictions and in many law firms, and it has gone before many local stakeholders. And still we believe that it will be served better if it goes to a committee and it has the benefit of a bipartisan look at it. However, Mr. Speaker, just to say, if I may, on a few matters which I know I can anticipate, one of which I believe was the subject of discussion last evening. Mr. Speaker, the powers of the minister. Partly this is a continued matter of some concern. However, as I said, we have gone through, Mr. Speaker, all of the legislation of all of the agencies in this sector. Wildlife Conservation and Management Bill, which, Mr. Speaker, I had the honor of introducing last year, July, the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, the Drainage and Irrigation Act, National Parks Commission, Environmental Protection Agency, Guyana Forestry Commission Act, all of which, Mr. Speaker, as I've set out in a schedule, which I'm prepared to share with my learned colleagues on the opposition side, which show that there is nothing inconsistent in this bill with the provisions of these other bills. As I said, we are being faithful to the system of governance that we practice. That is, we have an executive president who delegates powers to ministers, who in turn delegate powers to statutory agencies. That is why, Mr. Speaker, they are called semi-autonomous. And at the end of the day, the minister who is gazetted for and has responsibility is answerable to this House and to the President and His Excellency for what happens in a sector. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to just remind members of the House that the current legislation under which I as Minister function, I can say, gives more power than one would wish at this time to have. Section 3 of the Petroleum and Exploration and Production Act, for example, says the minister may, by notification, designate who is a public officer. It goes on, Mr. Speaker, in Section 10 to say the minister may enter into agreements with international companies for exploration. The minister may, by notice serve on an applicant. Section 12, Section 13, the minister may require. Section 14, the minister shall cause. Section 15, the minister may, by notice. Section 16, the minister. Section 18, the minister may issue regulations. Mr. Speaker, we believe that in its current construct, this is untenable. And this is why these powers, or some of them, are being devolved to a statutory agency. And so, Mr. Speaker, we should not delude ourselves into thinking that we are at the stage or that we are to find ourselves devolving all the powers, because that would throw our constitutional arrangements into some disarray. I therefore wish only to add that we have not therefore ascribed to ourselves any powers greater than that which exist throughout, Mr. Speaker, all statutory agencies. The other point I wish to make, and for anyone who has been in government and who is in government, when there's a hiatus, Mr. Speaker, during the appointment of any board, it is the minister who has to ensure that directions are given. All we are doing is ensuring, Mr. Speaker, that we are clothed with the requisite authority to do so. Anyone who has been in government or who is in government knows that when there is a period when no board, either the life of a board has come to an end and no new board has been appointed, or if there's a situation where an entire board resigns, Mr. Speaker, the matters pertaining to that agency or department must be allowed to continue. And it is always the case that the minister, that is the Westminster system that we have. The minister, Mr. Speaker, sees it through until the new board is appointed. So there's nothing here, Mr. Speaker, that tells us that we are dealing with a horror story or that Minister Trotman has ascribed himself or arrogated onto himself all of these powers of might. We have, as I said, taken away some of the powers that already exist in the Petroleum Act and will now be vesting them in a Petroleum Commission. Mr. Speaker, I wish to just say that the other matter of relevance that I wish to point out is finance. I'm told that one member of this House, honorable member, at a meeting last night, made reference to the reserve fund. I don't know whether he thought it was a case of monkey see, monkey do. But, Mr. Speaker, every statutory agency has a reserve fund. The GGMC has a reserve fund from which the Minister of Finance would write from time to time, monkey see, monkey do. No. Not because you say so, you used to do it, I would do it. So, Mr. Speaker, the Forestry Commission has a reserve fund. The Guyana, Georgia and Mines Commission has a reserve fund. The Minister of Finance is the only person who directs from time to time that they should be transferred to the consolidated fund. Again, Mr. Speaker, we have put in place the very same fund, and we will continue to act in the very same way. So, Mr. Speaker, how it is that it was not a private fund when it was in the hands of the other side, and all of a sudden it becomes a private fund. So, Mr. Speaker, it is good to go on line tops and dress up and carry on and be irresponsible, because we know that it is the law, and it is the law that we've all been using in our post-independence affairs. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I will reserve my comments for the rebuttal, and I would expect that this bill will go to committee. As I said, we did not draft this bill ourselves. This bill was drafted by the Oceans and Natural Resources Division of the Commonwealth Secretariat in the United Kingdom. We have taken this bill to many. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the bill was drafted with our guidance and advice. We have held consultations. I have the list here. We have received numerous suggestions, some of which, Mr. Speaker, we have been able to cooperate, some we have not been able to incorporate, and we are satisfied that we have a bill which meets international best standards and practices, and which is in conformity with, Mr. Speaker, the structures that we practice or have erected here in Guyana so far as statutory agencies are concerned. Mr. Speaker, oil is coming to Guyana. We must prepare for that eventuality, and this, Mr. Speaker, allows us the opportunity to do so together. And I say together because, Mr. Speaker, we have written into this bill the provisions that on the board there shall be a representative of the parliamentary opposition. In the past, when we had inclusive democracy, it was a matter of a gentleman's agreement that we adhered to. But we have placed into this bill that the parliamentary opposition shall be on the board, meaning that even if, Mr. Speaker, you had a minister who wished to run afoul, there would be that oversight, not in Parliament, but in the board by the opposition. We have also, Mr. Speaker, stated, Mr. Speaker, that members of civil society shall also be on this board to ensure, again, a second layer of scrutiny on our activities. We have nothing, Mr. Speaker, to run from. We have nothing to be afraid of. We have nothing to hide. We wish, Mr. Speaker, to develop this resource together, and this is why this bill is going to select committee so that we may get the benefit of any good and worthwhile comments and suggestions from the opposition. With those few words, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. And still I rise to end this debate. Mr. Speaker, Leader of the Opposition chose to intervene, and perhaps he said he had chosen not to speak, and maybe he should not have spoken. What we heard tonight, Mr. Speaker, was an exhibition of grazing, which ended in the gutter. And how could you, Mr. Speaker, come here and try to lecture us after you've left that behemoth that has failed in Skelter?
200
Have the temerity to turn up here and give us $280 million that can't produce 1 kilowatt of power, and then you want to come here and lecture as if you were the world's greatest economist? How dare you come here to lecture us? Mr. Speaker, this honourable member is nothing but a doctor of doom, because if the people of Guyana were to hear him, they would know that he has nothing good to offer. The Skeldon is down because of him. The Burbage River Bridge, we are barely holding it up because of him. Every sector that you touch is dumb because of you. The National Insurance Scheme, the Marriott Hotel, Mr. Speaker, under his government. Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, there was a certain silence that spread over the whole chamber a little while ago. Neither side was making noise. Now it's started again. I wonder if we could try a little harder just to allow a speaker to be heard.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Speaker. I was going to say that just 7 years ago, we had become a pariah state, awash with drug money and corruption. There are people in this house who couldn't travel abroad. People in this house who couldn't travel abroad. And Mr. Speaker, now we're being told and lectured to. Who are the pharaohs who just showed up and tried to tell us how to run a country? No. Mr. Speaker, the opposition leader has to remember he is in the opposition, has to remain in the opposition. Don't come and lecture us about good governance. We will not be lectured by the leader of the opposition on good governance, anybody else. I will take a lecture from Mr. Shearer. I'll take a lecture from Mr. Odinga Lumumba, but we will not take a lecture from you. No, not you. Never. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing up this debate, Mr. Speaker, you can say whatever. You are a failure. You're a failure as a failure. You are a failure. That is why you're sitting there, because you failed. That is why you're sitting over there. You failed. So, Mr. Speaker, I will wrap up very quickly. Mr. Speaker. My good friend, the honourable member, Mr. Lumumba, said we are good friends, and we are good friends indeed. But, Mr. Speaker, it was Bob Marley who said, your best friend could be your worst enemy. Some will eat and drink with you. Invention of this government has just arrived by the minister, the commissioner, and all the members by the minister. Mr. Speaker, reserve fund. If I can just be given the ability to go to section 16, and I just pull an act at random. Section 16. The Commission shall maintain a reserve fund. Was it a slush fund then? It's not monkey see, monkey do. We're not going to do as you did. So, Mr. Speaker, we don't in any way seek, Mr. Speaker, we don't seek to take or arrogate onto ourselves any new or different powers. We seek only to administer the petroleum sector in a manner that is fair and that is in the best interest of the people. But there are some misconceptions I wish to address. Firstly, the government of Guyana never intended to create an independent commission. We are creating a semi-autonomous commission. It is quite opposite to note that no lawyer who is a member of this House spoke on this bill, because the concept of public law and administrative law and semi-autonomous agencies, Mr. Speaker, I meant from the opposition. So, Mr. Speaker, we are not creating an independent commission here. Secondly, the bill, as I said, did not seek to exclude anyone. We have included the opposition and civil society. Thirdly, the questions about resource management and the finances. This commission, Mr. Speaker, is a regulatory commission. All fiscal, taxation, royalty affairs will be managed by the Ministry of Finance. We will collect only fees and penalties. Also, Mr. Speaker, we were asked about health, safety, and environment. There are other agencies. My good sister to my right, Minister of Social Protection, will take care of public health will take care of health matters. My other sister, the Honorable Chief Whip, will take care of the labor matters. The EPA will take care of environmental matters. But people believe, Mr. Speaker, that this commission is the mother of all commissions. No, it is a regulatory commission for a particular section. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the Honorable Prime Minister quite well addressed the issues of the powers of the minister. As I said, I can go through all of the legislation from 1966 to present, which shows that the minister oversees an agency and does have certain powers. And so I need not take up the House's time much further. I, Mr. Speaker, just wish to say only that some of us should not go about grazing about the place. They end up dirtying themselves and smelling bad. I rest my case, please. And I ask that this bill be read a second time. Thank you.
On that note, I must say thank you very much, Minister of Natural Resources, the Honorable Raphael Trotman. Those of you who missed the beginning of our brief program today, what you saw were the opening and closing arguments from the Minister of Natural Resources, the Honorable Raphael Trotman. That would have been on the Petroleum Commission on Guyana Bill 2017. Of course, it was moved. The minister moved the second reading in the National Assembly last evening, and you heard a lot about what he said about oil and gas and the sector and so on, and how provisions are being made. Just quickly, because of course my time is gone, just a reminder, the Petroleum Commission Bill makes provision for the establishment of a Petroleum Commission to serve as a regulatory agency for Guyana's oil and gas industry. It will also provide for the monitoring and regulation of the sector. On that note, I have to say goodbye to you from Facing the Nation for this week. Just remember, next week we're going to be focusing again on housing in Guyana, where we'll be talking to the minister, well, one of them, minister within the Ministry of Communities, the Honorable Valerie Patterson. She'll be here to talk to you some more about that. Until next week, I am Malika Ramsey. Thanks for tuning in. Those of you who tuned in late, as usual, you can follow me on social media. This will be uploaded before the end of the day to my YouTube channel. This has been Facing the Nation. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, be good Guyanese citizens. Bye-bye.